And generally, we need to think about sort of what are the fundamental policy principles that we need to achieve. Usually it's about consumer protection and competition. There are wider socio-economic considerations that we need to think about. Then I move on because I think time is running. Oops. Now, I looked for asterisks in Hungary or in Magyar, and I couldn't find it, but I've got a few there. One thing I love about Europe, being a European, being actually a binational European, is its diversity, is its variety. I think it's one of the greatest strengths of Europe. We've got a fantastic cultural heritage, a lot of diversity. Just around this room today, it's quite amazing and very much enjoyable. I love that. However, in terms of business opportunities and in terms of what users could benefit from, we're really missing the trick because the single market can't progress fast enough. Can't progress fast enough for all those innovative companies that are stuck in small countries around the EU. If all of a sudden you open the doors, if you break down the barriers and you say, well, tomorrow you will have access to a market of 500 million consumers, imagine the potential that is for a small internet company. That's the potential to launch products straight away to 500 million consumers, amortize costs, have economies of scale, which then mean that you can be competitive globally. That's exactly what those competitors in the internet economy in places like the US or Northeast Asia benefit from today. We need to get there. The great thing that I take reassurance from is that I know that many of you in this room are working on exactly those issues within places like BEREC, but we need to move fast and enable it. That will be good for users, of course, for consumers, whether they are businesses, again, public services, and others, because they'll benefit from more choice and better value. And us as mobile Europeans will increasingly benefit from that. So really, we need to speed up this idea about a single market for electronic communications. There's many ways in which we can get there in terms of specifics. It can be through mutual recognition for certain services. It can be through harmonization in certain areas. But really, that needs to happen if we want Europe to be competitive in this sphere. I think generally, I mentioned BEREC and the Commission here, and I think a lot of work is happening there, and again, it is truly essential. I can't emphasize enough how, from the perspective of internet innovators in Europe, we need the single market, and this needs to happen. That's true across what has been dubbed the single digital market. You know, it can be improved in terms of audiovisual services, and e-commerce services can be tremendously improved there. But in electronic communication services, it needs to happen. It's not there yet, remotely. And it should extend to other areas. It's not just about, say, notifications, things like that. It's about thinking about spectrum and how we can manage that harmoniously across Europe, numbering, competition, etc. We need to make it happen. Wow. Okay, another one. Another thing that goes hand in hand with both the single market and the ability to innovate in Europe, and the ability for Europe to be competitive in the 21st century, or have to completely forget about being competitive at all in the 21st century that is all about the information economy. The fact that we don't have an open internet in Europe. If you look around this map, this is actually an incomplete map. There should be many more red dots, for instance, in places like Spain and in places like Belgium, we've just heard. This marks all the countries where there are restrictions in place to what consumers can do with their mobile access to the internet. That means in practice that if you use your mobile to access the internet, in all these countries, you will not be allowed to access certain services. And sometimes it's just about voice over IP, and often it's also about instant messaging, and it's also about streaming, and it's also about audio, video, file sharing, peer-to-peer. Seriously, this is true. So actually, if you look at what you can do, quite often you can only do email and a bit of web browsing. The problem, if you go back to the wider picture, is that there is absolutely no point in rolling out high-speed networks, mobile or fixed, if the wider economy and society cannot benefit from all of the tools, content and applications that run over these networks. If you reduce the amount of information that is exchanged over these networks, you reduce the social and economic utility of having broadband. So either we tackle the problem of the open internet and we make sure that when we talk about enabling 100% of the European population to have broadband, it's actually the whole of the broadband internet that they get rather than subset of it. Then there's no point in building those high-speed networks. We should make that choice. I think it's already been made, that choice, in the European framework, but we need to make sure that happens now in national legislation. It can't happen quickly enough again. I've sort of mentioned all this already. It's really not about the profits and losses of corporations. It's about the EU's competitiveness. It's about how we want to have a thriving innovation scene in the internet economy, or whether we just forget about it and we think Europe will not be competitive in the information age. So we need to enable that in particular by ensuring that the implementation of the framework, when it comes to the open internet, upholds very clearly the principle that end users should have access to all the services and applications of their choice on the internet, with no loopholes, and with NRAs and the Commission having a very clear mandate, duty, willingness, powers to prevent abuse. I'm quite reassured again to see that some of the moves that I've witnessed already in Europe are moving in that direction. Very good examples in places like France, for instance, or Norway. I'd like to see that across Europe, and I can't wait to see Hungary coming up with its own open internet strategy. Generally, I want to sound a final note of encouragement. I think we can achieve all this. Europe can be competitive in the 21st century, and actually all the actors in the ICT sector can benefit increasingly, with users at the center, content providers, network operators, application providers, all benefiting. We need to realize this is a symbiotic ecosystem. Without the demand generated by new online content applications and services, we will simply have no demand for high-speed broadband. So let's keep that in mind. Let's evolve the business models, but not at the expense of each other. And regulators can have the role of what the ASEP commissioner has called the fertilizer, a gardener who puts great fertilizer on the ground so that the innovation tree can grow. It's a very poetic French way of saying, but that's the way we should think about it. So in short, we need to be user and innovation-centric in terms of the regulations we apply across the EU and drive the single market, focusing on what users want and letting them access everything they want. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean-Jacques.